Welcome to Her Success Matters, a podcast exploring how advisors can work together to build a pathway for women to succeed in financial services. I am your host, Christine Shaw, Chief Executive Officer of Investment News. This podcast will give you rare insider access to the top financial services executives who are taking action to break down the barriers for the next generation of female advisors. You will also hear from some amazing and inspiring women who have forged their own pathway to success. Welcome to Her Success Matters. Today's conversation is all about how women need to pursue their passions and not be afraid to take a risk in their career to fulfill their purpose. Joining us for today's episode is Shannon Spotswood, President of RFG Advisory, an award-winning and fast-growing RIA firm. Shannon was also recognized as a 2020 Woman to Watch by Investment News. RFG Advisory has also been recognized this year as an Investment News Innovation Award finalist for the firm's tech-driven and creative approach to service independent advisors. Supportive of financial literacy for women, Shannon is also the creator of StrongHer Money, a website to help women achieve their financial goals by providing information and support. Shannon, we're so thrilled to have you join us today. Welcome to Her Success Matters.
Thank you, Christine. It's an honor to be here. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
As am I. I first learned a little bit more about you at our last Women to Watch Advisory Summit, and I was really blown away. So not everybody that's listening today got that opportunity and privilege. So please tell our listeners a little bit more about your story and your interest in finance since you're a young girl.
Absolutely. And that was such a fantastic event that you hosted. So thank you for being so dedicated to really shining a spotlight on women in finance. And I know we're going to dig into that today, but those events are so important for our industry. And I was really honored to be a guest for that amazingly successful summit. I realize now as a mother of a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 12-year-old, how rare it is to know at a very young age what you want to do with the rest of your life. And as I look back through the lens of history, I'm almost confused by it myself now raising my children, but I knew at 14 that I wanted to, quote, work on Wall Street.
Wow.
I asked my parents for a subscription to the Wall Street Journal, and I was absolutely entranced by the idea of working with money. And as I was thinking about, this forum and this conversation with you and how important it is to go a little bit deeper, and it's easy for me to talk about, that time and being that young girl. But when I really reflect on it, it was so much more about wanting, to play in the sandbox and really roll up my sleeves and go head to head with the boys. And I was reading at the time all of these, great kind of cutting edge books, The Den of Thieves and Liar's Poker and A Random Walk Down Wall Street and Peter Lynch's Beating the Street. And it captured my imagination. And I knew from that very young age that I wanted to really forge ahead with a career in finance. And that's exactly what I did. So I moved to San Francisco in the early 90s, right after undergrad, had an amazing experience of joining one of the very first hedge funds in San Francisco. And what made that firm so special as it relates to my career is that the portfolio manager really responsible for their investment strategies was a woman. And again, this is in the early 90s. Hedge funds were still a relatively novel idea, and there were very few women who were sitting in that seat. And she was a mentor in every definition of the word, just absolutely poured her heart and her energy into training me up in the business and really giving me the tools to be able to move from that first hedge fund position into an investment banking analyst role with a firm called Volpe Brown Whalen. And our logo was a T-Rex with a dinosaur through it. And we focused on taking healthcare technology and technology companies public. And about 5 weeks after I joined Volpe, we took the first internet company public, which was Netscape. So I literally had a frontline seat on the creation of Silicon Valley and this amazing, like, young, disruptive energy of bankers really forging a completely new sector in the economy. So 2 years, an investment banking program, everyone knows the deal there. You're sleeping under your desk, working 100 plus hours, promoted into an associate position, helped start an M&A group there. And then I was really offered my dream job. As I thought as a young girl, I wanted to be a hedge fund manager. That was what I was after. I had the opportunity to join a second hedge fund, Symphony Asset Management, as a portfolio manager, where I spent 6 years in that seat running a long-short European hedge fund for them, and got to do some really, really extraordinary things and checked a lot of boxes on my wish list.
Shannon, what an amazing story. So I will say, I interview a lot of inspiring women on this podcast. You're absolutely the first who has said that they wanted a Wall Street subscription at the young age, or you knew what you wanted at 14 and asked your parents for a subscription. I mean, I've had a lot of women who knew maybe in college, but this is just amazing that you knew that at such a young age. And more importantly, it says a lot about you and your tenacity. You actually knew it, did it, read the right books, got the right tools, and, landed your dream job. It is a rarity for not just a woman, but a young woman, and to land that dream job at a hedge fund. Tell us what that experience was like back then, and what sorts of things did you experience as a young woman doing that would be helpful to know about today?
Well, it was a really different time. I think we've come so far in our industry in terms of opportunities for women. But back then, there weren't a lot of us that were sitting in that seat of actually running money. And I was so fortunate in that the founders of that firm were great advocates of women. They gave me opportunities to build a team, to be responsible for a significant amount of client assets, and to just have the opportunity to do things that at the time, a lot of women weren't, I think, in a position where they were supported into those roles. And they were very, very innovative in their thinking. We actually had several women, both on the equity side of the desk as well as the fixed income side of the desk, that were either PMs or sitting as traders. So we were a very diverse team. And that was at the time really unheard of. And now I think we're in a much different situation where women have proven, and the numbers will bear it out, we make great investors. Mm-hmm. We look at things through a different lens. We tend to have a different tolerance for risk. We are very strategic in our thinking. And the amount of alpha that female portfolio managers has been able to generate has certainly opened doors. But I'll tell you what was really special about my experience is I started with the firm. In each of my experiences, both at the first hedge fund, the investment bank, the second hedge fund, I was really on the ground floor of building these companies. So I was one of the first 10 employees at Symphony, and we were an innovative strategy in that we were managing money in a very unique way, strictly for institutional investors. We had a real quantitative expertise in-house, and they brought me in to really lend some additional experience on the qualitative side, having spent all that time in investment banking, ripping apart companies' balance sheets and cash flows and really understanding how to bridge that gap between quantitative and qualitative. So part of what made that experience so special is we were really pioneers in this quantitative, qualitative approach to investing. And the sexiest, most fun part of my tenure in that seat is that because I was running a long-short European strategy, I actually got to spend about 3 weeks every quarter for the better part of 6 years in Europe. I was afforded the opportunity to live in London while I was doing that. It was not only just a dream come true and a tremendous professional opportunity to be able to run as a lead PM, but I also got to live abroad and interact with different people and in different cultures and learn so many skills as a result of that. While I was running that fund, this is 6 years. You're running a European fund. I was getting in the office at 4:30 in the morning. I realized kind of at the end of that 6-year run, we had been acquired by Nuveen Investments, just, fantastic firm, this opportunity to take our institutional strategies and really develop something for the retail channel. But I had been so passionate about my career and so focused on my career that after 6 years sitting in that seat, I realized I had forgotten to have a baby.
Yeah.
It is easy when you're in the kind of the throes of this like really passionate career and so fulfilled by it that you do get blinders on, and you do, even though I had a wonderful husband, he was also in the business and running a fund. It's easy to kind of forget about the other side of your life when you're sitting and doing things that are all encompassing professionally.
Yeah. And, Shannon, so before we dig into that, one thing I would say is I, like you, had the opportunity, still do, not in the pandemic, though. I've always had international travel as part of my career. And I would advise any young person, if you have that opportunity or can work in a global environment, to take that, because there's no better learning than being with other cultures and being able to go to other countries and see all the different skills and all the different people and ways to do things. It's amazing. So I'm happy for you. You got to have that experience, and it sounds like it shaped a lot of who you are and what you've been able to do in your career. So let's talk about this moment. So now you're in this amazing career, all this great experience, your dream job, living in London part of the year. And then you're like, okay, I now want to have a child. So what did that mean for you and your husband at that time? And what did that look like in your career?
It's virtually impossible to have a baby and kind of keep up the pace of running the fund as I was. I was given this opportunity with Nuveen acquiring the firm to really spearhead an internal effort where we took our investment process and we created strategies for them. And they have just, an absolute powerhouse juggernaut distribution channel. So I was really within the firm allowed to create a new business for Symphony that Nuveen would help us to bring to market. And so it was another kind of entrepreneurial check mark in my career of, even though that was at the time now an established firm with an established partner, of building really a startup within the business. And so I was able to really, in that, with my first baby and then subsequently with my second, be able to tack within the company into a new role. And as you were talking, Christine, about the importance of international travel, I really had the thought of what is some of the advice? Like, travel abroad absolutely is critically, I think, important if you're given that opportunity. But the other thing for me is, don't be afraid to jump into the deep end of the pool.
Absolutely.
None of those roles that I had, whether it was being promoted into an associate role, helping start an M&A group, being given the opportunity to be a portfolio manager, I didn't have that experience, right? I had to learn that experience, and I wasn't afraid to not be 100% prepared and 100% like, I have all the credentials that I know will make me successful. I was really willing to just kind of jump into the deep end of the pool and fight like mad to learn those skills and solicit the feedback and develop those reflexes to be able to be really successful in each of those roles. So I pivoted at Symphony into this role, and I had my first child, I had my second child, and that's really when, and then subsequently had my third child. So I, in 3.5 years, basically had 3 children. And I realized after going through that and having these 3 young kids, and I'm crawling on airplanes, and the firm is getting bigger and bigger, and the opportunities for me are certainly there to continue on that trajectory of professional development. What happened was really one of the most disorienting moments in my life, because I had loved the business for as long as I had, One day I fell out of love with the business. One day I looked at these three small children and realized that I didn't want to do it anymore. For, someone who had really defined myself as a portfolio manager, as a professional in financial services, to lose sight and to be willing to not have that strong of an attachment to my identity as that professional was an incredibly challenging time personally for me. But at the same time, there was really no other answer. I knew that I had to pivot. I knew that I needed to do something different and to be able to really shift my attention to building a different business and being able to do more for these three young children.
And that's so important to have that authentic conversation about that, because I think what happens with a lot of women, well, we know they come into their careers, they really start to do well, as you have done, and then it's so tied to their identity. And then there's that struggle with how do you balance that with wanting a family, and not only wanting the family, but when you have the family, like you did, your three children, actually managing it all and taking care of it. And it's okay if you want to change your priorities and manage a different portfolio of children and your family. Tell us about, though, how did you help take care of your mental health during that? Because I think a lot of women sometimes come through it with guilt, or they should be able to have it all, and somehow it makes them less worthy if they can't. And there couldn't be anything further from the truth. So tell us a little bit about how you dealt with that.
I really hope that this is one of our great lessons as women coming out of the pandemic and in supporting each other, is that we move beyond this chapter of guilt and of shame and of self-doubt, and we really lean into each other and support each other in the power of the pivot and the power in recognizing that we're not in a linear path, that there's going to be opportunities for zigging and zagging. There's going to be opportunities to go back to school and acquire new skills that really empower us to make these decisions. Had I, it's interesting as I look back, had I stayed the course and really just continued in the hedge fund management world, not only would I have missed the opportunity to develop, I think, some of the skills that have made me really successful as the president of RFG, but the guilt that I would have felt by not prioritizing my young children at the time, I don't think I would be as fulfilled and feel as grateful as I am for the role that I'm having, that I'm able to have now, that I'm kind of been given this gift of building RFG. I really hope that it is incredibly difficult. And this is where it's like your true north is so important. It starts out as just like this vague feeling of I need to change something. And then it becomes like a steady, louder drumbeat that really rushes you to the point where you have to make a change. You have no choice. And I think that as women, if we really trust the fact that there are doors that we open by closing other doors, that there is real empowerment in taking those risks and recognizing that it's a long game, that by really changing our tack, we are not derailing our careers or setting ourselves up for future disappointment. It's anything but. It's anything but. Like, there is no doubt in my mind that this opportunity at RFG would never have been presented to me had I stayed just this course. And so I'll never forget the day I went in and told the CEO of Symphony that I was going to leave and I was going to start to partner with this woman. We started this company, this children's clothing company. He looked at me and he's like, and only someone in finance will get this joke. He looked at me and he said, well, the margins in children's clothing are horrible. Such a rational statement to this like incredible emotional journey. And what I think was important is that I knew myself well enough to know that I couldn't get completely off the train. So I pivoted out of working, in the tallest building at the time in San Francisco for one of the largest and most successful hedge funds to really being on the ground floor of this startup, but I knew I had to stay engaged, right? I immediately pivoted to growing another business. And I knew going into that, my intentions were very clear. I wrote a business plan. I had a 3-year game plan for how we were going to build this company. I knew what skills I was bringing to the table, what skills my partner was bringing to the table, and this opportunity to really think very strategically about what I had loved about investing, building a brand, thinking about financing. How do you scale? How do you create brand equity? All of those things I knew I had there. So I didn't go cold turkey, right? I really had a strategic game plan for, I need to step off this train that I'm riding right now, but I want to continue furthering my professional development. I need to fill and fuel my soul professionally. So it wasn't an on-off switch. I really did. And that's something that everybody kind of has to make their own decision. And for me, I knew that it would be critically important that I continue doing something professionally. It is too much a part of my DNA. I have to have an outlet for that professional energy. I pivoted, but I pivoted very intentionally to developing those skills and having that opportunity to do something completely different. And I think that that's a critical part as women think about the calculation behind these very important strategic moves in their careers. Is being true to yourself. Like, do you need to just fuel your soul and I need to shut it all off and I need to take 2 years and decompress? Or do I need to step into a part-time role? Do I need to step into a different industry that will have different demands on my time? So I think that as we think about the pivot and the emotional and energy recharge that comes from that, having a solid game plan was critically important to the fulfillment that I received from that experience, but also playing the long game. Like, I wasn't going to go sit on the sidelines. I knew that the skills I was going to develop would diversify me as a leader, and that was going to be really important in the future.
Yeah. And, Shannon, I think what you just described too is it's not a one size fits all and there's no wrong answer. And I think historically women were taught, if you made it in your career, you better get your head down, work. Don't you dare go off the path because that's going to just ruin your career opportunity long term. And that's just not the way it is anymore. And I think as women being supported, because for some women, they might need that 2-year break, but it all depends on your personal situation, your financial situation, where you're at, your health, your well-being, and everybody has to do what is right for them in their lives and make it prescriptive, And I think one of the things you just brought up, which is so important for women to understand, is your skill set is transferable, whether it be managing a portfolio, managing a family, or in your case too, let's talk a little bit about Busy Bees and how that clothing, children's clothing, and how it helped to rekindle your love. Let's get into that because that's exciting as well.
Absolutely. And it is really fun in the context of talking about finance to have this incredibly creative channel. And it opened my eyes because I had been so focused on the right side of the brain, finance and hedge funds and investment management and analysis and stock research. I had really never developed a creative muscle. I didn't, I knew about it from an investing perspective in terms of how do you drive enterprise value in creating a brand that resonates with customers, but I didn't know about it really from a skill set. And so here we are, I go from, the tallest building in San Francisco, running this, being a part of this hedge fund, running this really exciting business with For Nuveen, to pivoting to literally upside down boxes of inventory in a garage, and this concept for all intents and purposes for a company. So my partner had started the brand, but it was really more of a home show brand. We were selling predominantly infant cashmere and 100% cotton, non-flame retardant pajamas, which is like the Cuban cigar of children's clothing.
Yeah.
And knew that we wanted to create it into a brand that would be carried across the country in the wholesale channel. But most importantly, we knew, this is several years ago now, when e-commerce was really just beginning, we knew we wanted to build a direct-to-consumer site, and we wanted to have control over that brand story and be able to really showcase the entirety of the collection. So this was 101, like an MBA in startup. Everything from how do you finance a collection? We were manufacturing over in Hong Kong, so you have exchange rates and distribution and all of the logistics that are involved there. And it was just a completely new world. So the professionalization of that company, and we had a lightning strike moment when Gwyneth Paltrow actually purchased the brand at this fantastic store at the Brentwood Country Mart in Los Angeles and wrote about it on her newly launched, at the time, really personal blog, Goop.
Wow.
And that was pixie dust, right? Fairy dust got sprinkled on top of Busy Bees, and really overnight we went from calling everyone and people not taking our calls to the phone lines ringing off the hooks and the orders pouring in. And from that experience with working with Goop, we ended up doing a collaboration with her. We were able to go to Vogue and just all of these fun creative pursuits. So it really was a dream realized of building both a direct-to-consumer business in the e-commerce context, as well as 150 stores across the country carrying the brand. And my business partner today still runs that company very successfully and has actually launched a women's brand, Mayor St. Bart's, on the back of it. So there's been longevity that has outlived my day-to-day involvement, which is so critically important. But it really brings that Busy Bees chapter. It fueled my soul. It reinvigorated my energy, and it just I learned all of these skills about e-commerce, about social media, about branding, about communication in a very personalized way, like finance. I think we're getting better at this now on the retail wealth management side, which is where I concentrate my energies and where RFG plays. But we tend to walk this very narrow path of what is appropriate in terms of marketing in the financial services arena, and we forget that brands are emotional. We're marketing and selling and communicating to people. And consumer brands are really great at that. Learning that skill set and being able to take that lens as we've developed the brands and all of our advisor brands at RFG, there's no way I would have been able to do that had I stayed in the hedge fund, investment banking, institutional finance world. It never would have crossed my path. That would have been a muscle that I never would have developed.
Shannon, so that is amazing. I mean, from going to portfolio manager to being part of Busy Bees and having that pixie dust moment and being able to use all the learnings from a direct-to-consumer brand, and then bringing that all the way to back to finance and RFG Advisory and what you do. And I think what you said is right. It's like we have to be more creative about how we market financial services and the products and how it can help us. That's one of the things I think about. It comes across so dry and intimidating. Money is emotional, right?
Yes.
So it's like I know there's regulation, we have to be careful, but it's like there's nothing more emotional than the industry we're in. Yet we talk about it in such a dry, boring way. So it's people like you, I think, who bring that energy and that experience to the industry, which is fantastic. But that's going to lead me to talk about StrongHer Money. Tell us a little bit about that, why you created it and what it does.
Absolutely. And I'll give you some context on that. Running Busy Bees, decide to pack up our family and move to Alabama, get to Alabama and realize that we want to stay here. We want to raise our family. And my eye starts to wander, right? So I've had this creative chapter. I've been running this retail company, and I realize it's time. Like I've rekindled my energy and enthusiasm level, and I want to get back into the financial services industry. But because I had these experiences of sitting on the rocket ship at two hedge funds, at an investment bank, at Busy Bees, kids, I called that search my seeking the intangible. And what I mean by that is I realized what was going to be required for me to get back into the financial services industry full tilt was that the intersection of talented people and opportunity and the gift to build something bigger than yourself is what really fuels me. That's what gets me out of bed. That's what would be, enticing enough that I would kind of restructure my life and go back in 110%, knowing that I was going to have to make some really difficult trade-offs as it relates to my children and the balance that I had created with Busy Bees. But joining RFG, the reason that was the opportunity, and I partnered with the founder of the firm, is in our very first meeting, we talked about we want to build the RIA of the future. And you just touched on it, Christine, when you said money is emotional. And as we talked about thinking, what does the RIA of the future look like? For us, it was recognizing this convergence of disruptive factors, the generational wealth transfer, the amount of private equity going into fintech companies, the disruption from robo-advisors. But it was also very importantly recognizing that clients of financial advisors are looking for a very different experience in the future. They don't want a financial plan that's static in a binder on a shelf. They don't want, a couple meetings a year or one meeting a year with their financial advisor sitting around a boardroom. They want a highly personalized, really bespoke experience that puts money and emotion right at the center of that conversation. You're helping them to really to build their financial life. It's not just their financial plan, it's their life. As we thought about tearing down RFG 1.0, a firm that had been founded in 2003, and going through this massive disruptive change to build this foundation and this platform for RFG 2.0 and the RIA of the future, it became very clear in the course of that conversation that one of the missing pieces was how financial advisors engage with women. And this was a really important, just kind of personal, if you will, lifelong passion of mine, having worked in finance and having so many smart female friends who were really intimidated by money or disconnected from the conversation of investing. You said it really well. It's very dry. It's very boring. We love our jargon. So we do everything we can to really put up these barriers to make it very clinical, when in fact it is one of the most important parts of our lives. We would put paying attention to money up there with our faith and our families. Our financial well-being is critically important to our lives and to our children's lives, to our families' lives. And so the creation of StrongHer Money was really a natural extension of building RFG 2.0. And initially, and we're really in the infancy with this wonderful platform, is twofold. It was to provide advisors a conduit to have conversations with their female clients and at least acknowledge the statistic that the majority of women in transition, whether it be death or divorce, will fire their financial advisor because they have felt that they have been excluded from that conversation. So let's acknowledge that. And then the second was to provide a pathway for advisors to have very intentional conversations with female prospects using education and really empowerment through education to open up the dialogue for hiring a financial advisor. And maybe the woman on the receiving end of that education ends up wanting it to do it themselves, or they're not quite ready to engage one-on-one with an advisor. At least they now have a community that has been designed for them, that is really, our motto with StrongHer Money is to live financially fearless. That's the goal. That's the goal. Let's open up this dialogue. Let's have meaningful conversations. If we have a relationship with a financial advisor, let's empower women to have access to the education. Let's commit to really using that money to, as I always love to say, what's the point in dying rich? Let's instead live richly.
Yes, I love that, right? That's a great expression and statement. And the future of financial advice has to be more diverse in its approach and its conversation and how it treats people, because you're right, nothing is worse than that image that you conjure up of going into the office and you're sitting at this little uncomfortable table. You just don't even want to have the conversation, and they're talking to you in jargon rather than in real terms. I think this is spot on. And I think that the need and the desire for this will continue to grow as more and more women not only are part of the workforce, but have their say at the table about money, how it's managed. They should have a voice, even if they're not the breadwinners. It's important to have them as part of the conversation and how we take care of our money and invest our money. So I love what you're doing. That's fantastic.
Your 2021 icon, Sally Krawcheck, does a fantastic job. And I have certainly borrowed from her brilliance in rattling off the empowering statistics. Like, you get a room full of women and you start sharing the statistics around, the 51% of stock market wealth is controlled by women. Women make 90% of household financial buying decisions. Women hold the majority of management roles now in the country. More, the college statistics, like, you can go on and on and on with these numbers. And it's a real rally cry.
It is.
And it's, it's something that you can almost watch the room, like the energy shifts when you get up and you share these statistics, because women kind of step back and they're like, you're right. I do have an important voice in this conversation. It is important for me to really be proactive in these decisions as it relates to goal planning and thinking about how I'm really engaging in the conversation around money. So, she's a trailblazer on sharing that. And it is something that I feel like we can all really shout from the rooftops, because the more women who hear that message, I think the more willing that they will be able to say, like, it's okay that I don't know everything. It's okay that I have questions, but I'm going to take that first step and I'm going to be proactive in securing my future.
Absolutely. And being curious. It's funny, we talk about the word curious a lot on this podcast. And I think one of the secrets to a lot of successful women is they are curious and they ask the right questions so that they can have the knowledge. And it's okay if you don't know something, but it's not okay to be silent, right? So we have to encourage. If there's something you don't know, ask. And that's why resources like you're providing with StrongHer Money are part of that empowering and knowledge. So I love that. Shannon, my gosh, time has gone by so quickly. I can't even believe we've already been talking this long. It's amazing. But with all the facets of your experience in your career, so what's the next chapter look like for you?
Well, I am in the midst of one of the most exciting professional chapters in my life. The goal for RFG is to build the RA of the future. And that, for us, we really live by a culture that is warrior mindset, servant heart. And the RA of the future, as we define it, is really this personalization of money. It's both in terms of how advisors are serving clients, but how, as a firm that serves advisors, how we're really empowering them, enabling them, not just to build enterprise value in their practice, not just to have access to the great, marketing tools and compliance support and investment resources and strategies. Those are all obvious components of a platform that's empowering independent financial advisors. But for us, it really is about the whole person. This is that personalization of money. Like, are you bringing your best and most authentic self to work? Are you really passionate about what you're doing? Are you allowing that passion to be shared with your clients? Are you thinking about mindset? Are you becoming obsessed with your team and your deliverable and your client experience and how it impacts your family? Are you getting 1% better every day as a leader, as a father, as a mother, as a member of your community? So we really believe the future for us is building RFG, building the RA of the future, and really wanting to bring all of those pieces together. Because if anything we've learned in 2020 from the global pandemic, we allowed the pendulum to swing too far in one direction. It can't just be all about work at the expense of our mental health, at the expense of our relationships with the people that we matter. There has got to be just an intentionality around how we're building our teams, how we're focusing on access to equitable capital, how we're serving and building diversity into our businesses and into our teams and to those that we're working with. That to me is really it's gonna keep me busy. I really can honestly say I thought that I had my dream job when I landed that portfolio manager role at a hedge fund. I never would have imagined that I would say I have my dream job being the president of an RIA based in Birmingham, Alabama, after spending north of 20 years in San Francisco. But I really have never been more energized about my future as well as the future of our industry.
Well, and that energy comes through. And what's amazing and what is important to let young women know is that you can create new dreams. And at that time, that was your dream job. And now as life evolves and your needs, priorities, and dreams change, then opportunities can present themselves in so many different ways. I'm so happy for you. And I'm grateful that you shared all of this. You're such an inspiration and you're such an energizer. I have to sit there and go, gee, am I doing 1% better in everything as well? But it's a great story. Starting at the beginning where you talked about you knew what you wanted at 14 and you've turned this into just such a fantastic career for yourself. So well done and thank you. So how can people follow you and RFG Advisor practice on social media?
Yes, please. We are big users of social media and big believers in all those forms of communication. So I am on LinkedIn and I'm on Twitter, Shannon Spotswood, Twitter at @spotswood RFG. We're also on Facebook, so RFG Advisory on all of those social media platforms. And StrongHer Money is also on Instagram. So we are trying to get out there to all of those platforms. And then, of course, on our websites at rfgadvisory.com, StrongHer, HER, StrongHerMoney.com, and rfgadvisorywealth.com is our client-facing site.
Well, and then that brings me to my final question that I ask all my guests. I would love to know in your words why you believe her success matters.
I think this is one of your most powerful questions, and I so appreciate you asking it of all your guests because there are so many reasons why it matters. First and foremost, because you can't be what you can't see. And I think that as you showcase all of the fantastic and accomplished women on your podcast, it holds out examples and really makes women believe that path is available to them. And I think we all collectively welcome more women on the journey with us. But to me, her success matters because as an industry, we haven't done a great job of shouting from the rooftops, like, come and join us in finance. We've been anything but. We really have a reputation for not being accommodating to the different chapters of a woman's life, whether it's raising children or the sandwich generation, taking care of aging parents. We don't tend to do a great job of showcasing how many different avenues you can pursue within finance. I mean, you've had this amazing journalism career in the financial world. There's marketing and compliance and legal and event planning and all of these different ways. And we don't invite young women to get excited about our industry. And yet it is one of the most fulfilling. It is one of the most challenging. And it's an area, what I love most about working in finance is not only is it dynamic, but at the end of the day, we're all, I think, really knit together because we're trying to help people. And we don't do a good job of letting that be known. We kind of get painted by this like Wall Street brush as opposed to all the good that we're doing, whether it's as financial advisors or in the banking sector or as investment managers. There's so many paths and there's so much good being done by our industry. So her success matters to me as an invitation to the next generation of talented women to join us us in this incredibly rewarding career.
I love that. That's one of my favorite answers to that question. I didn't intend to ask that question for every guest, and then it became a thing, and the answers are just incredible, and that itself is inspiring. So thank you for that. And Shannon, thank you again for your time and agreeing to come on Her Success Matters, and congratulations for all the great work you're doing.
Thank you so much, Christine.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Her Success Matters. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available, and share this podcast with others that believe her success matters.
The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Investment News. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service providers with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.